No, although intro music would be great. If we're talking about the 1920s, you've got some of the best music. Oh, yeah, what kind of music did you have from the 1920s? Yeah. Jazz, blues. Well, rock and roll hadn't come around yet, but rock and roll would emerge from jazz and blues. Any particular musicians you can associate?
Louis
Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, yep.
John Coltrane.
John Coltrane.
In there. Patrick
All right. We got Patrick the Aspiring Jazz / rock star. Elvis Jail's going to emerge from it. Oh yeah, Louis Armstrong for sure. And they were all part of what bigger movement? Yeah, Harlem Renaissance, 1920s. So, what we're going to do here, there's actually an image we'll look at that has to do with jazz and the Harlem Renaissance. But first, we're going to look at some other images that are based on your notes from video 21 about America in the 1920s. So what I want you to do is when each image comes up, just take a few seconds, take a look at it, and try to provide any kind of historical context or any connections you can provide to these photos. Because photos, they tell you some information. You can tell color, you can tell kind of what's going on, but there's a lot to the story that may not be told that hopefully you'll be able to connect based on your notes and your knowledge about the 1920s. So it's based on video 21, but you can reach back to video 20 or video 19 or any other videos that we've watched and try to make those connections. All right, so here we go. First video. Take a few seconds. For those of you who may not be able to read it, the sign that they're holding in the middle says, "In compliance with the 18th Amendment, no intoxicating liquor allowed on the premises." All right, so who can provide us with some context? Renisa.
Prohibition.
Okay, what was Prohibition?
The movement to influence others not to drink alcohol.
Right. So Prohibition, yeah, not allowing for the production of alcohol or not letting people drink alcohol. And so how do you know it's Prohibition?
Because it says the 18th Amendment and no intoxicating liquor.
Right. So the 18th Amendment actually prohibited the creation and sale and transportation of alcoholic beverages in the United States. Do you remember the time period? Do you remember the exact year it was passed?
No.
No? Well, I mean, we're looking at the 1920s, so... Close. Anybody know the exact year that Prohibition took effect?
1924.
There you go, 1919, yeah. It took effect in 1919, but it lasted... Lisa's got better ears tonight. Yeah, so it took effect in 1919, but it lasted for the entire 1920s. Now, 1919, that was kind of the culmination of what other era in U.S. history? Yeah, progressive era. So all these major changes taking place, and Prohibition was kind of the capstone, where it's like, yay, we've made all this progress, and now Prohibition. We're not going to allow alcohol to be made or sold in the United States. Speaking of that, so what else can you say about Prohibition based on this photo?
It was child pleasure.
Jay Sean?
Yeah, Prohibition wasn't taken seriously since the sign says in compliance with the 18th Amendment and no intoxicating liquor, but yet everyone has liquor on them.
Mm-hmm. And I can assure you that's a lot of really expensive liquor too. That's not cheap moonshine that somebody made in their bathtub, or that grandpa made in the distillery out in the mountains. This is nice stuff. This is being made in a nice facility. Yeah, they're holding a sign saying we will obey Prohibition, and they're not. Yeah, it's like if you're walking down the street, you see a no loitering sign. You just hang out there.
You were real rebel.
Just wait, see what happens. Yeah, people park. Yeah, you park. Welcome to DC. That's just what you do. So yeah, people are scofflaws. Remember, that's a word that came out in the 1920s, out of Prohibition. What do you call people who are scoffing at the law? Scofflaws. What else is this image telling you about the 1920s? Nailed it?
That women are starting to take a leading role in Prohibition, and also that they're doing more things like drinking in public.
Okay, so women taking a leading role in prohibition. So you're right, in the temperance movement, the prohibition movement, women took a very strong role, took a big role in that movement from the 1800s on. In this image, are these women working to promote prohibition? No. What are the women doing?
They're drinking.
Yeah, right alongside the men. So what is that telling you about the 1920s, particularly women in the 1920s?
They were out there breaking gender roles.
Yeah, changing gender roles. Anybody remember? Would you have seen women in saloons? I was about to say salons. In saloons? Yeah, you didn't see them unless they were a woman of questionable reputation. Yeah. So the 1920s, suddenly when drinking goes underground, anybody remember what the name was for the drinking establishments in the 1920s?
Bars.
They were called bars. No, bootleggers were the ones who provided the alcohol. Remember, you had to go up to the door, knock, and it would say, hey, yeah, there you go. Speakeasies. Because you don't go be like, hey, I know this great bar that's around the corner. What's the password? Alozi, what's the password? Man. No, you got to go be like, passwords, drink for free? Yeah. Or bootleggers? I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. Yeah, so there probably is speakeasy somewhere. Drinking, flaunting their alcohol. Men and women, mixed company. Enjoying a drink and mocking the 18th Amendment, mocking the Constitution of the United States. This was the Constitution, the same document that established the government. We the people. It has the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech. Yep, right up there on the walls. Yeah, same document. People are violating. 1920s. All right, what about this image? Oh, instant reaction. Brianna?
Oh, I said flappers.
Yeah, these are flappers. What can you tell us about flappers?
They showed too much.
Like, they were kind of wild. They dressing different.
Okay. So they dress very different, differently. So, I mean, what can you see?
Their ankles.
Not just their ankles.
Their whole legs. They're carrying so much skin.
Yeah. And what about the age of these women? What did flappers enjoy doing?
Late at night.
Dancing, what else?
Smoking.
Yeah, they smoke, they drink in public.
Public.
Yeah. What else? What else became suddenly a very common discussion topic in the 1920s? It made a lot of people uneasy. In fact, it makes people uneasy today. Yeah.
Oh God.
Oh, the sex stuff.
Yeah. They might actually they weren't their husbands. Fiancés. Yeah. Very different times from today, but how shocking was this to society back in the 1920s? Yeah. Well, you just finished World War I. Which how would something as monumental, as important as World War I kind of lead to this more liberal society? You said something about freedom? Okay, what about freedom?
Because I feel like in the war they didn't have as much freedom to do what they pleased. They
Okay.
kind of like obey what the commander told them. So when they came back, they felt free to do whatever they want.
Yeah, if you'd served in the military, or remember in the United States how strict we were with laws, even about protesting the war, and you had to do rationing. Your transit was controlled. Remember the federal government took over the rail cars. So basically your life was very structured, very controlled. You're kind of being told what to do. And then if you were in the military, you were definitely told what to do all the time. You come back after the war's over and you just want to, yeah. Also, more importantly, especially the ones who had been fighting, what kind of effect does a war have on people who've been on the front lines? Well, they're traumatized. They've seen a lot of things that are just horrific things. And so when they come back, some of them might be driven to Well, not necessarily to kill, but just to kind of live
Feel
it
like
up.
they're still there.
Yeah. So yeah, some people
Was
did.
it grim for their lives?
You've heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Back then it was called shell shock. There's all the shelling, all the bombing. And so some of those soldiers came back and they were disillusioned. They're like, what was it all for? People were just killing people. Bodies were just being ripped apart. My best friend, is no more. There's nothing left to bury. People like remember F. Scott Fitzgerald. Did y'all read The Great Gatsby?
I saw the movie.
You saw the movie, okay. So Gatsby serves in World War I, and when he comes back from World War I, he's determined to do what? Get rich and live it up, chases pure life, and he does whatever it takes to get her, to try and win Daisy. Very ruthless. You have people like Ernest Hemingway. Y'all ever read any Ernest Hemingway?
Never.
Okay. He writes a lot about World War I and about veterans afterwards and how they live it up. They drink, they go out all the time. They just try to live a very adrenaline-filled lifestyle, find excitement. They're not going back to get an office job and settle down with a wife and kids, that kind of thing. So flappers, while they weren't a direct reaction to World War I, it did just kind of show this loosening up of society. Be like, hey, let's have a little bit more fun. Life is short. These women probably all knew somebody who had served in World War I. Brothers, fathers, uncles, friends, and things like that. All right. Number 3. All right, take a second. All right, what do you got? Give me some context. Brianna.
I was gonna say that entertainment they had back then.
Yeah. Was what?
Yeah.
Yeah, jazz was big time entertainment back then. Jay Sean.
Well, I can't necessarily make out the faces, but is Duke Ellington?
No.
Anybody famous?
Duke Ellington is. I don't think this is one of Duke Ellington's groups. If anybody, this guy kind of looks like him, but I don't think this is a Duke Ellington group. What else? Any other context? Ezra?
Renaissance?
Yeah, like y'all were talking about before, Harlem Renaissance. But where did a lot of jazz actually emerge?
South.
Yeah, New Orleans. Home of Louis Armstrong. Kind of made its way out of New Orleans and then got caught up in Chicago, into Harlem, into Kansas City. Why?
Because the migration.
Yeah, the Great Migration, which was what?
Great migration of African Americans during World War I. They escaped the South from Jim Crow laws and moved to get economic opportunities.
Yeah, you had such a large number of African Americans leave the South and head north. And of course, when they move up there, they're not just taking their clothes and taking their families with them. They're taking what with them? Taking their culture, taking their music. So why was Harlem able to thrive? Yeah, you got a mix of generations, but those generations all tend to have what in common? Well, a lot of them, yeah, they had struggles in common. They were what? Yeah, they were black. And they weren't just black, they were also black and living in a majority black community, which makes you more comfortable in your own skin. Getting out of the South and the Jim Crow laws that every day made you very aware of what the color of your skin was. Yeah, suddenly you're hanging out with other people who they're not going to judge you based on the color of your skin. They're just going to care about, hey, look, you want to play this song? You play an instrument? You play drums? You play trumpet? Let's go play. Yeah, Patrick. Imagine if we were looking at a picture of Patrick Carr up here. Could still happen. The next Harlem Renaissance.
Oh, yeah.
So what else? So we got jazz. Jazz is the big music of the day. We got the Harlem Renaissance, New Orleans, Chicago, St. Louis, Kansas City. Saw a lot of jazz. What other contexts and connections can we make to this?
I had a question.
Yeah, which question?
When did swing dance come into play?
Swing dance came to play more in the late 30s and 1940s, and then had a revival when I was in high school, back in the 1990s, for some reason. No, Footloose is not swing dance. You could see a movie though called Swing Kids. That is about swing dancing. But that's when these jazz bands got much bigger. Had these massive trumpet sections and other instruments. A lot of the jazz bands that you listen to in the 1920s and 19-teens are very small ensembles. I mean, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it had instrumentation like banjo. I mean, how many of you, when you think of jazz, you're like, yeah, banjo?
Yeah.
Never
I don't think I heard a song from the 1920s with a band on it.
Yeah,
It's not good.
a lot of it had banjo, which kind of makes sense because where was banjo a very popular instrument?
In the South.
In the South.
I still sing.
Yeah, I mean, how many of you listen to a John Coltrane record or Miles Davis and be like, oh, where's the banjo? I need more banjo from. Or even somebody like Duke Ellington, who got his start in small ensembles like this, and later Duke Ellington recording, he's like, oh man, just needs more banjo.
Yeah, I was here like,
And now usually when you think of banjo, you think of what?
Country.
You think of country music, which has a lot in common with blues. Not so much jazz, but we'll let the music historians do it. Anything else? All right, let's take a look at this one then with the 1920s. One last image. Oh yeah, just so you can see. So this says U.S. This says immigration restrictions. Down here it says close the gates.
The
This
thing-
is in Chicago.
The suitcase said undesirable.
The suitcase says undesirable.
I know. I think that's
Yeah.
Making connections to Donald Trump. Okay. See, does history repeat itself?
sadly,
unfortunately.
All right, so let's go to the immediate context in 1920s, though, when this cartoon came out. Okay, say again, Brianna?
Immigration restrictions.
Yeah, immigration restrictions get implemented. Do you remember which ones in particular? Well, but the Chinese Exclusion Act, yes, that was a severe one of the most severe immigration restrictions we've ever had. But when did that go into effect? Is not 1890s, 1882. 1882. So by the time we got to the 1920s, Chinese immigration was down to almost zero. Very few Chinese immigrants were able to come into the United States. Same thing with Japanese. Remember the Gentleman's Agreement in 1907? That restricted Japanese immigration to the United States. And it got further restricted in the 1920s. But who in particular was targeted by the Emergency Quota Acts of the 1920s?
Eastern Europeans?
Yeah, Eastern Europeans. Who else? Because Eastern Europeans would be countries like Russia, Romania. What other group was really targeted that had come over to the United States in large numbers in the late 1800s, early 1900s?
Was it the German and Irish?
German. Well, the Irish, the big Irish migration happened when? During the potato famine, which was in the not 1860s, a little bit before that. 1840s. 1840s and 1850s, when we saw millions of Irish come to the United States. So there were still Irish immigrants coming over, just not as many. Definitely not millions. But in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we had seen millions of Russians coming over. There were still German immigrants too, but remember, Germans, why were most Germans okay? Yeah, a lot of them could speak English, they had some education, what else? Yeah, a lot of them had money. And they just, to the nativists, to those racist organizations, they're like, hey, this looks like a strong, hearty, healthy American.
my God.
Whereas somebody coming from Russia probably didn't speak English, probably didn't have much money, and they also were probably what religion?
Communist. Oh,
we're not to communism yet, but we'll come back to that in a second. But if they're coming from Russia, they're more likely what?
Oh,
There you go, Jewish. A lot of Russian Jews came over because they were being attacked. Pogroms, kind of a predecessor to the Holocaust of World War II. They were being attacked by Tsarist Russia, persecuted, killed. But they were also coming from Italy. And what's the dominant religion in it? Catholicism. And there were plenty of Catholics in the United States back then, but nativists, the one who really didn't like immigrants, wanted to restrict immigrants, what religion did a lot of them practice? Yeah, they were Protestant Christians. All right, Miguel, let's go back to your mentioning of communism. All right, so what had happened in 1919 and what had happened in Europe during World War I that made a lot of people think about communism? Stalin, but who preceded Stalin? Well, the Tsar, but the Tsar had been overthrown and replaced by what?
It's the brothers, right? No. The Russian Revolution happened, right?
Yeah, the Russian Revolution happened, and that established what government?
The communists.
Yes. What was the name of the country?
The Soviet Union.
Yes, the USSR.
Jesus
No, they were actually atheists. Yeah, they weren't a big fan of religion, based on the theories of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, Communist Manifesto. Yeah, the Soviet Union is established. And so now there's these worries about a communist takeover of the United States. It happened to Russia. Why could, yeah, there you go. So the Red Scare happens. And so this guy's head, I know somebody at first thought it was Chinese because they had the tail like a lot of the Chinese immigrants came over, which they had it was a sign of loyalty to their homeland. But what is this actually?
A bomb.
Yeah, it's a bomb. So what was the worry with the Red Scare with communists?
It's gonna blow up in their face,
Yeah, they're going to destroy our country. They're blow up our country. Remember, what happened to Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer's house?
He got blown up.
Yeah, he didn't get blown up.
He was
Almost. Yeah, his house got blown up. You can still go see it on R Street, right off DuPont Circle. I mean, it's not. It's an orthodontist office now. So, I know you go. I run by there all the time, and you're just like, all right, there's the house. It's an orthodontist office. Okay, I wonder if he's even a good orthodontist. Which I would bet he is, because the rent on that place is probably incredible. But right across the street, what is, I think it's not the Nigerian embassy, but it's an embassy for a country in Africa. That's the house where Franklin Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt were living at the time when that happened. So they were actually home when the bombing happened. All right, good work. We're going to move on now to your next assignment. So you want to keep your notes out to use for that.
Yeah, that's what I'm